All right, good. So my name is Jason Peterson. Own Woodstock Hemp Company. We are a hemp farm located in Molalla, Oregon. We also do consulting services for the hemp industry, marketing, and brokerage services. Prior to this, was involved in the medical marijuana industry on the indoor side, doing cultivation. And 4 years ago, when the hemp industry was federally legal, that's when we decided to make that shift. We quickly realized what was happening in the Oregon medical marijuana program was falling prices, too high of supply, not enough demand. And it's funny that 4 years later, I'm now experiencing the same exact thing in the hemp space that we experienced in the cannabis space that many years ago. So it's nothing that's I'm very familiar with it. If you guys haven't had any experience in the cannabis space prior, you will have no idea what I'm talking about. But if you have, again, it shouldn't come as a surprise to you, just on a much larger scale. So my first year, my brother and I, Jared, we rented a U-Haul truck and drove 22 hours to Colorado to pick up genetics, because at the time, that's where some of the best genetics we were told were from. So we started with some BOX, some auto, and some stout varieties, and then turned around and drove 24 hours straight back. In hindsight, we would have just flown out there and then rented a U-Haul and then drove back. But, again, one of those things you just don't really think about, maybe at the time, whatever. We took a detour around Idaho. We did know that we didn't want to go through Idaho at all because we didn't want to get busted with a bunch of hemp plants in the back of our van, only to have someone think that they were cannabis. So we did know that. Got stuck in an ice storm on the California and Nevada border. And so if you can picture my brother, he's driving this car or this U-Haul van, no shirt, just his shorts, got the heater cranked up on full because this panel van is like completely uninsulated in the back. So we got boxes of these plants, and I've got like towels over them and blankets over them, trying to like get as much heat trapping in these little boxes as we could to keep these plants from dying on the way back. And he had the heater cranked up to full and driving in the middle of the night in an ice storm. So it was pretty ridiculous. And at that point I was like, what the hell did we get ourselves into? I honestly, I was terrified. I was like, this is never going to work. And luckily, all of our plants made it. We didn't lose a thing. We did have an aphid infestation our first year, so that was kind of a shock. We realized those came with us, made the trip from Colorado. And it was really neat, mid-August, July, having my nieces and nephews and family members just releasing like tens of thousands of ladybugs into the field. I mean, just arms just covered with them. We ordered them from Phoenix. And within about a week, they ate through every single aphid that we had on that crop. So, it was a live and learn, and has been ever since we started. So we grew from 1 acre to 4 to now we operate a 43-acre farm that we do for biomass, 100%, pesticide-free, fungicide-free, no herbicides, no heavy metals, fully sustainable, drip irrigation, mulch plastic. And then we operate a 2-acre off-site area for just flower production. And then I also am the project manager and hemp specialist for a 500-acre farm out in Powell Butte in Central Oregon for an Australian agricultural technologies company. And so their focus is infrared aerial field analysis. So this year we did some really cool stuff trying to see if male plants gave off like a different IR signature than female plants to try and do some sexing in field. Unfortunately, we didn't discover anything. They give out the exact same IR signature. So nothing to report there. But a lot of really cool stuff with this company. They do soil moisture monitoring. So we got a lot of really good data regarding soil types, what the CEC ratings were, and when and how specific times of watering really matter, both in pivot and with drip systems. So a lot of really cool experience learned from there. But this session here is really going to focus on the sales side, right? So we've grown our crop, we spent all that time, we spent all that money, all those resources. Hopefully we had a really good harvest. If you guys were in Central Oregon, any of you guys get hit with any hail, lose any crop? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's always a challenge there with weather. You cover all your bases, and unfortunately, you can still put out a banger crop and get wiped out. And you can still put out a banger crop and not have anyone at the table to buy it at the end of the day. And so again, this session is really going to focus on the sales aspect. So assuming that you've got your crop off, it's viable. You've got some decent potency numbers. We'll go through and talk about kind of the quality, what extractors are looking for, what labs are looking for, what buyers are looking for, and what we're seeing in the marketplace. So again, farming looks mighty easy when, your plow is a pencil and you're 1,000 miles from the cornfield. And that was a famous quote by Eisenhower. And it's absolutely right. Like, you can plan and plan and plan and plan and plan, but it's all about execution. And at the end of the day, it's what you've got in the bag. So again, you think you're done. And while this may seem like the best part, sales is by far the most frustrating, especially if you're like myself. I had a really nice contract with a well-respected lab that I had beat out all these other farms for. And by the time it came to doing our deliveries at the end of October, they came back and said, hey, man, that price that we negotiated 2 months ago, it's not going to work. And I understood that. I recognized that because, I knew where the market was at. I knew that it had fallen significantly since then. And I said, you know what, that's fine. Let's renegotiate, because I understand that you can't operate a business and pay that price if that's not what the market's going to allow. So I had to understand there was some flexibility there. So we renegotiated the contract to a lower price. And then they came back about a month later and were like, hey, Jason, we don't really have any money to pay you. And I was like, all right, well, this would have been really nice to know, 2 months ago when we started this negotiation. And so it's stuff like that, again, you can do all your due diligence and you can plan and you can make these contingencies. But at the end of the day, you are working, it's a business-to-business transaction, and you have to just do all your due diligence that you can. And even if they're a reputable lab, you still run into situations like that. So luckily, they were able to get an investor and get them some funding so that they have some operating capital. So back up and running. But needless to say, it hasn't gone as well as I would hoped. And, my 30-day terms are now like 60, and we're starting to get some money come in, but it's taken a little bit while. So hopefully you guys kind of have some budgeting built in there to account for stuff like that. So what I've got, I put together kind of first, like just kind of 20, just really like quick and dirty rules when it comes to any sort of sales transaction with biomass or any sort of hemp product in general. First and foremost is that no deal ever gets done overnight. Like, we're talking, tens of thousands of dollars in hemp, hundreds of thousands of dollars possibly in extracts. I mean, these are big dollar values. And, you can look at a bag of biomass and have no idea what's in that. I mean, a 5% bag of bio and a 14% bag of bio are exactly the same. And so what you have to understand is that these people that are buying this product, I mean, they're putting out a lot of money, they're putting out a lot of effort, they need to do their due diligence. And while you may think that, that's 10%, because that's what my COA says, recognize that you probably have only sampled maybe a pound of that material in your 100,000 pounds of biomass that you have. So what they're going to want to do is they're going to want to make sure that what you say it is really is what it is. And so oftentimes that involves with a small purchase. Maybe they'll buy 100 pounds or 1,000 pounds and they'll run it. And then they're going to extract it and see what it extracts. So your COA may say 10%, but it may only recover 90% because you just can't capture all the CBD in that oil. I mean, some extractors have better efficacy rates than others, but for the most part, if they're leaving 5% on the table, that's not that bad. So, I mean, you can expect to see some sort of discrepancy between what the COA says and what the extractor tells you it's actually recovering. Now, if they come back and say, well, hey, this stuff is only recovering 5%, and you say it was 10, in my experience in that, I say, well, look, let's send them another sample set and see what the next batch comes at. And oftentimes I tell the farmer, look, if it's on you and you really think it's 10, then write something in the contract that says, look, I'm gonna front you another 500 pounds. I'm gonna front you another 1,000 pounds to run it to see what it's recovering, or send it to another lab and see if you get different results. But again, these things take time. Everyone has to do their due diligence, and everyone has to act and structure a deal with integrity and understand that, like, you have to stand behind your product. There was a farm that's not far from mine in Malala, and they sold 60,000 pounds to a group in Colorado, and they sold it with the understanding that it was 12% material. That's what the Colorado buyer paid for it. They got it over there, and it was recovering like 6%. And the farmer said, well, sorry, I'm not going to give you your money back. So that is what it is. And it's stuff like that, that just ruins and cripples the market. Because you may have a lab that their whole business model is structured on the purchase of this agreement, and now they are underwater, bankrupt, and so they don't have any money to pay anybody else. And so, the farmer, it's his responsibility to, or her responsibility to make sure that they're putting out a product and standing behind it and honoring what exactly it is. Because again, it screws everybody else up, because now that lab can't buy from me, or they can't buy from you, or they can't buy from somebody else. So number two is just always do your due diligence. Don't ever take anybody's word at face value. I mean, if anyone ever calls you and says, well, I heard you have biomass, like, you have to wonder, well, why are they calling me? Like, how do I know this person, or who am I connected? How am I connected through them? And you need to walk that chain back. So if it's, oftentimes I want to try and get to, I want to get to the end user, because I know that if I'm talking to a consumer who has a brand, or I'm talking to a lab that's going to extract a product, I can talk to them in a way like I can best, demonstrate what my product actually is, because I've grown it. I know what it is. I know what the farm is. And if I'm going through a broker, they can't do that. Like, it's just a commodity at that point. So you as a farmer have to build value in your crop. Like, why is your crop different than anybody else's? Well, I don't use pesticides. I don't use fungicides. Sustainable farm practices, all those things help build value to your crop. If you use drip irrigation, all right, well, we use drip irrigation, so we use less water. So we're using less resources. That's great. What do you do with your old hemp? Do you till it back into your soil? What kind of amendments do you use? All that stuff kind of builds a story around your product. So when you start going through like that broker chain, you're turning it into a commodity, at which point it's just about price. And so, do your due diligence, work with a brand. Try and find a brand that you like or that you see online, and call them and ask them and say, hey, look, I see you guys make these oils and this and this and this. I would like to be a supplier for you. Here's why I think I could, supply you with your biomass. How much do you need? How much do you consume? Or they may say, hey, we don't buy biomass. We only buy distillate. And you say, okay, great. What kind of distillate do you buy? Well, we buy full spectrum. All right, how much do you purchase? And you go through that whole chain. And then you say, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to go to a lab, and I'm going to find out now what it's going to take to turn my biomass into distillate. Because maybe I can turn my biomass into a product that they then can use and work it that way. And now you hold the power in that kind of contract, because now the deal is between you and the consumer and not you and the lab. So the lab holds the leverage every time they have a contract. But if you as the farmer have a contract with the consumer, well, then you hold leverage over the lab. So you can now shop your contract with the other labs and get a good deal. You say, hey, look, I've got 10,000 pounds of biomass. I need to turn it into distillate. What are you going to charge me to do that? And you go to 4 or 5 different labs, and whoever's going to give you the best deal, all right, well, maybe that's the one that you want to work with, or you just find one that you want to have a long-term relationship with. So, but again, the idea is that, don't take anyone's word at face value. If they say they can do something, just make sure that you're going through and doing all your due diligence there. And then it follows right into, which is ask the next question. So as a farmer, oftentimes we think, we're just going to make this biomass and we're just going to send it off and it's going to get turned into a product. But it's really important for us to know, like, what those products are. What is a distillate? What's a crude? What does it mean for something to be winterized, something to be raw, something to be decarboxylated, non-decarboxylated? Those are all, find out as much as you can about the entire supply chain. Talk to the labs, ask them, are you doing CO2? What kind of extraction do you do? Do you do CO2? Do you do ethanol? Do you do butane, isopropyl? There's lots of solventless. There's lots of different ways to turn biomass into an oil or an isolate. And so it's just always making sure that you ask that next question. It's gonna show that you're interested and that you want to know how you can better facilitate the purchase. It goes a long way. And I may have already touched on this, but number 4 is, if you are working with a broker, I always tell the broker, if a deal comes to me and it looks like it could happen, I always tell the broker, look, I will take care of you on my end. We'll structure an agreement, whatever you were putting on it, 5 cents or 10 cents, whatever it is, I'll pay you out of my pocket. And we'll sign an agreement right now that if we can get a deal done, that's what I'll pay you. But it's not going to happen unless I'm able to talk to the end user. And if they're not willing to do that, then you just walk away, because oftentimes you're just going to spend days and weeks sending out samples, doing COAs, walking through this whole process, only to have them ghost you at the end of it, because it wasn't a real deal to begin with. So a lot of these guys, like, they're just trying to find a supply chain, and then they're just going to go market that to somebody because maybe they think they got a guy or they know a lab or something, and there's just really no substance behind it. So I always tell the broker, like, look, like, if it's just the two of us, then me and the seller or me and the buyer will split your brokerage fee, whatever that is. If there's 2 brokers in the middle, whatever it is, like, we'll split that. I'll take care of you on my end. They'll take care of you on that end, whatever it is. But I have to work with the end user. And that's the only way. If you're going to ship it, who's going to take responsibility for that, right? Like, who's going to pay for the insurance? Who's going to handle all that kind of stuff? Like, at the end of the day, it's a B2B transaction. It has to be treated as such. Draft a contract for any deal. I don't care if it's 1,000 pounds or 2,000 pounds, doesn't matter. Get it in paper, have it signed, mention that you've got an attorney and that you'll have your attorney look it over, because again, that's another way to kind of weed out any sort of tire kicker or bullshitter out there. I mean, immediately, as soon as you say, great, I'll have my lawyer look it over. Oftentimes they'll just like, if it's a bullshit deal, then they'll walk away, and you'll save yourself time and hassle and headache. So, also, no one is ever buying 2 million pounds of 14% biomass. That deal doesn't exist. So if you've ever heard of it, it doesn't happen. No one needs that much. That's a lot. First off, if you're going at let's say it was $10 per pound, then you're looking at, what's that? That's $20 million. Like, there's not a lot of extraction facilities out there with that kind of buying power, right? There just doesn't. Like, there's not a lot of big banking behind this industry. It's a lot of VC funding. So no one just has $20 million that they're willing to just go throw and buy on biomass. Just doesn't happen. So I always tell people, look, if they're looking for 2 million pounds, why don't we start with 10,000 or 100,000? I can, if you want, I can get 2 million pounds. I can do that, but let's start with something that's more realistic first, and let's try and get a deal done before we try and just shoot for the moon. Let's just try and kick a field goal first and see if we can get it through. And if we do, great. There's more trust built. We can scale up, maybe do a slightly bigger purchase next time, maybe 200,000 pounds, and go from there. Additionally, no one's going to take 2 million pounds right now anyways, because it would just be sitting in a warehouse somewhere. So if like a 2 million pound deal did come across my table, chances are they're going to want 240,000 pounds for 8 months, right? They wouldn't want it all at once anyways. So if you are negotiating a sale, expect to send a sample lot for testing. So no matter what, you've got your COAs, that's great. But at the end of the day, it goes back to what I was saying. These things don't happen overnight. That doesn't mean a thing. They're going to want to make sure that once they extract it, like let's say you had a full panel done and it shows no pesticides, no fungicides, no heavy metals. Awesome. Well, who's to say that once you extract that product and concentrate it by 6x, that now you may have had an arsenic level that was below recordable levels, but now that you've concentrated it 6 times, maybe now it's above the limit. You don't know those kinds of things. Or maybe you had abamectin. Maybe there was trace amounts of abamectin that weren't in the biomass, but now that you've concentrated it, now they show up. So that's the kind of stuff that a lab's going to want to run that stuff into a finished product first, then do testing on that finished product to make sure it's what they want before they actually go back and say, yeah, let's sign the deal and take all that biomass. So understanding like they have to do all their due diligence and all these processes have to get done first before they're willing just to sign over a $500,000 check for some bio. Buyers and sellers have all been screwed, so it's not just the farmer; it's everybody. So everyone's always going to be gun shy, and that's why I said it just takes baby steps. If you can meet the lab, if you can go and shake their hand, look them in the eye, invite them to your farm, show them what you're doing there, so they can see it and they know that you're reputable. That goes a long way. If someone can actually see where you grew the crop. It's so much easier than just trying to do a deal over the phone in which you've never seen them or through text message or something like that. It really does. It goes a long way. Number 9 is never be afraid to ask to see funding. So if they say, yeah, they want to buy $150,000 worth of biomass, ask to see some sort of bank statement or something that shows that they have that funding or that it is available in some way, shape, or form. If you're doubtful of the deal at all. If they have it and they're willing to pay for the biomass, that won't be an issue at all. So, exactly. Show me the money. So this in number 10. This is exactly from my personal experience. If you got a contract, as a farmer, you really need to include some sort of financial penalty if they fall through. Again, it's another way to cover your ass. You've put a lot of time and energy and effort into growing your crop and resources. And just because they don't uphold their end of the deal doesn't mean that you should be the one left holding all the cards. So again, you guys went into a contract negotiation on good faith, and if in they good faith want to make that agreement, then they should justify that by backing it up with some sort of financial penalty if they fail to meet their obligation. So, and if they don't, it throws a red flag. All right, well, is this the kind of company that I want to do business with if they're not willing to stand behind what they say? So, all right, number 11. Unless you absolutely have an outlet for your finished product, don't do splits because you're giving the labs material for free. And under no obligation are the labs responsible for selling your product, right? Like you're giving them free oil to sell that they now didn't have to pay for, and they're going to sell that before they sell anyone else's product because that's their profit right there. I kind of tell farmers you're ruining the market if you do that because you're just giving away something that you paid for and now it has no value. And not only that, I mean, you're giving it to someone else who is then going to turn it into a profit and they're going to sell it before they'd sell any of your stuff. So if you can, I highly recommend avoiding it at all costs. Force the labs to, come get some funding, to come into this and bring some money to the table. Like I said, unless you actually have an outlet for a finished product. So for example, I have contracts for distillate. All right, well, if I have a contract for distillate, I'm more willing to do a split with a lab because I know I'm getting distillate back that I can then use to fulfill my contract. But don't just turn product into something that you are then now have to go sell. Like you're having a hard enough time selling biomass. What makes you think you're going to have an easier time selling isolate or distillate or crude, right? Like what you don't know who your market is for that. So how are you going to do that? So again, I highly recommend not doing splits if at all possible. Anybody have any questions about that? Because it's one that everyone always is like, asks about. No?
Jason, I'll throw out there a question on where do you see that people are doing splits? What are they these days?
So typical split right now, because of price. So last year was like 50-50. You could get a 50-50 deal on crude very easily. Most any lab was offering it. This year you're looking at a 60-40 split. So 60 to the lab, 40 to the farmer. And that's because prices have come down that much. So farmers are actually now getting less than half of what they grew. So distillate, you're looking at anywhere from 60-40 to 65-35. Same thing with isolate, about 65-35 split. Yes? Yeah, you have to be, and again, you have to be very diligent about that. So in one of the contracts that I have, it is a split deal, and they are obligated to sell, in any sale that they have, they're obligated to sell at least at a minimum 20% of my product. So they can't just sell 100% of theirs. They have to sell 20% of my product that they have on shelves in order to facilitate that. And so, yeah, you just got to make sure it's in there. But if you don't, they're not going to do it. There's no reason for them to do it, because why would they sell your stuff instead of their own stuff? Yeah, very good. All right, number 12, pretty obvious. Do not ship product without getting your money first. Okay, just don't do it ever. Yeah, I did it once. First year, did it once. It's like, yeah, all right. Nope. I won't talk about it. Don't do it. So number 13, if the buyer's serious, they're going to want to cover all their bases, and they're going to want to take their time. Again, it goes back to like these things take time. It could take 3 weeks to get a biomass deal done. It could take a month. I mean, that's not unreasonable at all. So just expect those things to take some time. When they say they're going to run a sample, it may take, depending on the lab, it could take 3 or 4 days before they run the product into a crude. It may take a day or two to get the test results back for the crude. So, it could be a week from when you deliver it to when they actually know what the crude turned out to be. Number 14, don't trust the COA. They can be doctored. Ask for a sample and have it tested yourself to confirm. And this is more so for the labs, obviously, that stuff. There's a company that isn't too far from mine that's notorious for doctoring COAs. It's not illegal in any way, shape, or form, but it's highly unethical. And it doesn't really serve any purpose, because if they were doing their due diligence and doing a deal properly, they would take a small sample and run it and say, well, this is extracting way differently than what your COAs say, so let's try another one and another one and another one, And so inevitably someone's going to find out. But if you had someone that if you were a lab and whatever, you didn't do your due diligence, you did material right away, you took someone's word for it, you could get screwed pretty quickly. Number 15 is let the buyer manage the shipping. Always let that be their responsibility. You don't want to be held liable if the stuff gets held up in a post office or customs or state board or anything like that. Let the buying party manage that aspect of the deal. Always. If you're shipping pounds through the mail, I highly recommend they get like a UPS account or FedEx account or something like that. Have them make you the shipping label, and then you print their shipping labels and then just take it to the post office or the FedEx or UPS, whatever, and just drop it off. So, if you are shipping something, this is 16. If you are shipping something in the mail, make sure you include all your relevant paperwork, COAs, copies of your permits, your compliance documents, everything, just to demonstrate that your invoice, if you have it, just to show that it's not to say that it's not going to get picked up, but if it does, it looks a lot better on you if it just shows that you're doing everything right and being forthcoming with all that information. So 17, be professional all times. Invoices, we're not selling weed here. I mean, these aren't cash deals. Create an invoice. If you're shipping material, like create a bill of lading, create a shipping ticket. I use QuickBooks for all my invoicing. It's very easy. It's very professional. People can pay me that way. It works really well, and it goes a long way. Having these paper trails between buyer and seller, it shows that you're a reputable individual, that you're trying to do right by yourself and your company, and that you take pride in what you're doing. And so it should reflect in your product as well as your processes. And I'm sure it does. Again, if you're the kind of person to put out that kind of product, then you're going to do that as well. If someone ghosts you, if your potential buyer ghosts you, he was not the buyer. So it goes back again to trying to find that end source, trying to find the end user, and getting to them as quickly as not as quickly as possible, but just cutting out all those middle guys, keeping them onto the sidelines, and then paying them on the back end if you can. And we kind of touched on this too. So yeah, labs, unless you have it negotiated in your contract, they're not obviously obligated to monetize your product. So. And then number 20, which is, know the market and know what your product is worth. I've gotten a lot of deals done, not because I was the cheapest, but because I stood by my product and the buyer knew that what they were going to be getting was what I told them they were going to get. And I stand behind all of the oils that I sell, all the biomass products that I sell, all my flour, all of it. Like if you're not happy with it, I will replace that product for you for free. Send it back and I'll send you new oil, because I stand behind all of it, and I should be if I'm in this business. Know what crude is, know what distillate is, know what the prices for those things are, and that's gonna if you called around and talked to labs and asked for pricing on some stuff like, hey, what are you selling this for? If I bought 5 kilos a month, what would you sell me distillate for? If I bought 10 kilos a month, make some calls, do your research so you kind of know where to price your stuff. Right now, biomass, if you're selling it on like a strict per point basis, it's probably going anywhere from 50 cents to 70 cents a point. Realistic, that's where the market's at right now. So, $8 to $6 to $10 a pound is kind of where biomass is out. And it sucks because you put a lot of hard work into it, and you were probably expecting to be getting paid like $1.25, $1.50. But it's just not going to happen because the market is just so saturated with that product. The demand for CBD, the growth was, maybe this much, but the supply for CBD, is like astronomical. And it's a lot of people were fed, a lot of smoke. They were told that, I'm making a ton of money doing this, doing that. And you really weren't. And it sucks that a lot of people got into it kind of with these false expectations. Because, if anyone really thought long and hard about it, you can't scale a business just infinite, right? It has to trend. The supply and demand have to trend. So if you're creating a product and you have a supplier agreement with somebody, you can't grow any faster than what they can consume your product. So for everyone to just all of a sudden, I'm just going to throw up 20 acres or 25 acres and not have an outlet for that product, really kind of screwed the market in a sense, unless they were working with like a co-op, or like I said, they had like a contract that kind of fell through. But because there is so much biomass on there, now people are scrambling to try and sell it, and it's a race to the bottom. And so, I want to try and recoup anything that I can. Well, I'm going to sell it for, if I've got to sell it for 50 cents or 60 cents, that's what I'll do. Recognizing that it's not the best for the industry, but it's that individual mentality. It was like, well, the ship is sinking. I need to do what I can for myself. And I get it. I'm not to say that I wouldn't do the same thing, but hopefully not ever have to put myself in a position where that was an option. That being said, we all love a good scapegoat, and I was at a lab in the state of Oregon, an extraction facility in the state of Oregon last week, touring their facility. They're getting GMP certification, and nice new lab. It's getting built out, and they had some distillate for sale, and I was talking to them about marketing some of their products. And so I went to go, it was an old bank vault that they had all the products stored in, and I went in there to go see how much distillate they had. They had like 500 liters. and on all of the liters were Chinese labels. So it was all distillate that had been imported from China. And what this company does is they have a partner group in China that purchases seed from Colorado, ships it overseas, grows it over there, processes it over there, and then ships the oil back to the U.S. And it took everything. And I mean, I almost just walked out right then and there. He sent me an email with the NDA for to do marketing services for, and it's still sitting in my inbox. I haven't opened it, and I'm just not going to. I'm going to write him an email response probably next week. But it's stuff like that that's really frustrating, right? Because now we're not, now we're competing against a country like, another country that can produce this stuff for literally pennies. And we're not having to compete with that. And that's why the prices have crashed so much. I mean, crude is, $450 a liter. It's because, isolate we can get from overseas for $850 a liter, $900 a liter, or a kilo. So it's all based off that isolate price, and then everything basically just works back off of that. So, we're no longer competing against all the other farmers in the state or in the U.S. We're now competing against international markets as well. So just something to be cognizant about as you decide what you're going to do, year after year after year. And now it's something too that, that's another reason to start understanding the market as a whole, because now you can pitch your product as being, U.S. made, U.S. grown, and start going to your suppliers if you are going into a supplier agreement with a company and ask them, well, where do you get your distillate? Well, we get it from this lab. Great. Do you know if it's made in the U.S. or is it imported from China? Oh, I don't know. Well, ask, find out, because that may give you some sort of leverage in a negotiation over the sale of your product. So the key to understanding, how to best sell your hemp, like I said, is just to understand what it's going to be used for, what products it's going to be made, and then understanding what's happening on the retail level will help give farmers kind of an edge in the negotiation and talking and working with labs when they're trying to form partnerships. Right now, we're hearing a lot of talk about CBG. Everybody heard about CBG? All right. CBG is one of these things that it's completely based on the industry side, and there is no real demand for CBG on the retail level. I'm just tell you that right now. There aren't CBG products out there, and they don't exist because nobody knows what those are and nobody knows what to do anything with. So right now, CBG's only use is for making spec products. So let's say you have a distillate and you strip everything out of it and it's just CBD. Well, we all know that the cannabinoid oils work best when they're mixed with CBN and CBC and CBV and CBG. And so CBG right now is used purely as kind of a substitute to kind of make these spec blend products. So now you can make something that's 80% CBD, 2% CBG, 3% CBC. So if you think, all right, well, if it's a 40-to-1 ratio then between what CBG and CBD is. So if you had 40 acres of CBD, you would need only 1 acre of CBG. Nobody's buying CBG isolate. I mean, it's just, again, so just understand, if you heard people talking about CBG, just do a little research into it. Find out, well, where is that being consumed? How is it being used? This and that. Because again, you may find that it's not really a thing. And it does have some benefits in that the THC levels are significantly lower than CBD, so it's more easily to become compliant, and then there's sort of state testing. But again, if a lab doesn't want CBG biomass, it really doesn't do you any good to grow it. So, what's that?
I don't agree.
Oh no, yeah, tell me.
Liters go for an extra $3,000.
Yeah, but I bet they're not selling that many liters. So. Yeah, no, I believe people ask me about CBG all the time. They tell me about CBG all the time. And
CBD 10 years ago when I was trying to sell it in medical.
Yeah, but it was
then.
also illegal then. So now it's federally legal, so anybody can grow CBD and CBG. So literally in a year, the growth of CBG production is 100x. So at the beginning in October, I was selling CBG biomass for $135 a pound. Now it's down to $42. CBG isolate was $28,000 in October. It's now $7,500. It costs the farmer recognize, everyone realizes now that it costs you just as much money to grow that pound of CBD as it did to grow a pound of CBG. The only difference was probably in the price of the seed, which was probably $2 instead of $1. So you're at $2 a plant instead of $1 a plant. So other than that, your costs are exactly the same. I hope there will. I mean, honestly, like that's what we all need. We all need growth, but I don't think it's going to come. It's not going to come from the industry side. It's got to come from the retail level, and it's got to come from the consumer demand. And right now, we're not seeing that for CBG.
Jason, isn't there also some confusion in the marketplace about the extraction of the CBG? That there tends to be...
It doesn't extract nearly as well. The efficacy rates are significantly lower.
Right.
So yeah, like typically it takes 15 to 22 pounds of biomass to make a liter of crude. That's 60%. CBG typically recovers 30 to maybe even 50%, or 30 pounds to 50 pounds of CBG biomass to get 1 liter of CBG crude. So it just doesn't dissolve as well. It just doesn't break down as well as CBD. So there will be some more efficiencies that will be built into that system as processing kind of catches up. But yeah, it is one of the factors that plays into the price of it as well. So CBG flower. So that one actually, I didn't think there was a market for it 2 months ago, and then now what I'm hearing is because the THC level is significantly lower. You can easily ship it, right? Total THC is well below 0.3, so it can go all 50 states. So the price is now competitive, though, with what regular CBD flower is. I'm seeing a slight premium, like CBG flower I'm seeing going for $250 to $300, kind of a wholesale. But again, the advantage being is that you're more likely to not have it be not total THC compliant. So it's not that they want the CBG, it's just they just want a smokable flower. Is really all it boils down to. They don't care if it's CBD, CBN. They just want something that they can smoke that looks like weed, that tastes like weed, in a state where they can't have weed. So.
Please use the microphone.
Yep.
Sure, no problem. Is it on? Check. Okay, I'm being a presentation interrupter. Is CBG, do you have any feedback on if CBG flower is even nice to smoke? I don't know. And I'll just add quickly, the small experience I have, exactly what you're saying. We just want flower we can smoke legally.
Yeah.
It's smell. It's not even CBD content. The smell good, look good. That's what I've been seeing.
Yeah. So to your question, it really boils down to the grower, right? Like what the quality of the product is. I mean, if you cured it right, if you were giving it nitrogen all the way to the very end, it's probably not going to smoke that well anyways. In my experience, it's a little harsher than CBD in general. I don't really get the effect that I do out of CBD. So, for what it's worth, everyone's different. But in my experience, there's very little difference really between CBD and CBG, other than with the CBG, like I said. And it smoked a little bit harsher, but that was just my personal experience in the few times I've done it. I typically don't smoke it, but what I am hearing farmers talking about and looking at doing, which is an interesting thing, is kind of they're blending their CBD and their CBG biomass. And so what some guys are going to be doing is looking at doing, if I'm doing 20 acres of CBD, I may do 2 acres of CBG, and I may blend that so that when I sell it to a lab, that finished product, that extracted product right out of a crude form is going to have a higher and more complete cannabinoid profile than just a CBD biomass, and therefore is going to be better as a full spectrum product or even a broad spectrum product in general. So it is something that farmers may want to look at and consider doing, supplementing an acre or two of CBG and then actually blending it in at somewhat homogeneous ratios within their CBD bio. So yeah, I mean, and so again, all this kind of, I guess, really boils down to, the extraction process and understanding, what's all involved with that. And so, basically I just kind of did a quick and dirty on, what those processes are like, hydrocarbon extraction, being, isobutane, butane, so BHO, if you've ever heard of that. Really quick and dirty. It's effective. However, we all know, if you ever hear about like that guy who blew up his garage doing some extraction, most likely he was using hydrocarbons, so very Breaking Bad. So definitely, in large scale, we tend to not see it as much. CO2 and ethanol extraction are definitely more where people are going when it comes to kind of large scale extraction. So CO2, supercritical CO2, of course, stripping the materials from the botanical substances. This has been used for a long time, just for stripping, oils from tons of plants, lavender, and to create perfumes. The nice thing about CO2 is you can get the terpenes that carry over, whereas with ethanol, you pull those out. And so with ethanol extraction, that's probably the most common, using a low temperature solvent recovery. It can be done at very large scale. It's really good for like doing tincture oils and so forth. So all this stuff too can come out pre-winterized, which is really nice, so that it really doesn't need much further refinement. But again, it goes back to working with the labs, understanding what capacities they have, what products they're making with your biomass if you're going to be selling it to a lab, and then just asking them, getting a tour of the facility, letting them show you what they're doing and how they're doing it. It'll help you feel more comfortable navigating any sort of sale process. And then of course, it basically just goes from the steps for extraction for biomass to crude to distillate, and then distillate to isolate. Or you can go biomass to crude, and then from there go crude to isolate. Typically, if you're going to do like a CO2 or ethanol extraction. So, that kind of covers a lot, kind of what I learned in my experience and on the sales side and overcoming those challenges and those hurdles. Going through and, looking at like contracts. I signed a contract in, it was September of this year at $250 a point. And I mean, looking back now, that was completely unrealistic. So you really need to build in those contracts some kind of contingencies and just work with whoever it is that you're buying with, understanding that like you have to work together in order for both of you guys to be successful if you're hoping to form like a long-term partnership. And so just, don't think that everyone is out to screw you, but most likely everyone has been screwed at one point or another. And so everyone just has to cover their bases and do their due diligence and making sure they're making smart decisions for themselves, their business, their families, and their reputation. Because at the end of the day, like, that's all that any of us have in this industry anyways. We've been around. If you've been around a long time, that's 4 years. That's not a long time to really build a strong brand. So, I mean, you're really just trading on your name. So you want to make sure that, you can keep that as clean as possible. So, yes, sir.
Do you have the material you put on the screen on the web that we can look it up?
Yeah, so after the show, we're going to basically upload all the presentations, all the information from these seminars will be available on the website. So, yeah. Any other questions? Anybody have any horror stories? Yeah.
We probably all do.
Yeah.
So you got a couple things on there. I see under the ethanol processing, you have a few things mentioned like full spectrum oil, distillate production, edibles. Now, what would the CO2 method be more in favor of in the end game?
So CO2 would be more like a product where it's going to actually have the terpenes in it as well. I mean, it's just another way to extract. I mean, you could do it for the same thing, but the nice thing about when you do ethanol extraction, like you're stripping out all that other non-CBD stuff, and so it requires less refinement to turn it into an edible. So in an edible product, in most instances, you don't really want it tasting too much like weed. So for a gummy, for example, you just want the CBD, and you want the oil so it can they can blend it within the mixture well. And so you don't want all the taste and the flavors and all that. So that's why an ethanol extracted product would work better for some.
There's only so much mint you can put in there to cover that taste.
Yes.
Another thought I had when you were talking about blending your CBD to get a more well-rounded cannabinoid profile in, let's say, biomass, wouldn't that also give you a compliancy rate that might be easier to achieve since it's less in the THC and it's en masse? Yeah.
So yes and no. So on compliancy, you shouldn't have an issue with compliancy anyways. I mean, if you guys are growing hemp, I mean, there's no reason why you should ever be above 0.3 total THC anyways if it's hemp and you're testing in week 5. I mean, that's just the fact. Like, if you're doing it right, you should never test hot. To your point about, that's more like shipping it over state lines, so it's not a compliance issue. It's like, but it would be significantly easier for me to ship a blended product across state lines because CBG is going to have a much higher THC CBG ratio, and so it's not going to have as much THC in it.
Well, yeah, I mean, shit happens, like there's genetics that could be just slightly different than what you thought they were. There's a lot of different factors that come into play. I'm sure a lot of people here have had stuff that tests hot and they thought they did everything humanly possible to not get a hot product. Yeah. So it is definitely something we have to deal with a lot. And obviously the more we weed out better breeders and more knowledge and more, consistent like genetics that have been existing for more than just a year.
Yeah.
So
Well, and
that all works its way out. But like, some of us are still dealing with the repercussions of having things go the wrong way and a little sideways. So the more we can kind of like skirt through that and still get something out of it and still make something that's kind of compliant, maybe we're still sitting on something that's 0.02% over and you're 0.32. Well, maybe you can add some CBG. You're not defaulting a product. You can make full disclosure on what you're doing, and you still have something that you can ship past state lines.
Absolutely, yeah. And what I tell people too sometimes, like maybe run a strain that is a lower quality. So like on this 500-acre hemp farm that we ran 25 acres that we knew was like a lower potency product, because that way at the end, if our stuff tested hot, we knew that we could blend that lower potency stuff.
Yes.
Or if you're doing if you're combine harvesting, that's an easy way to do it. You run your first batch, you test it, and it's testing hot. Well, all I have to do is open my sieves and collect more stock and stem. I'm going to water down my product, but that's okay, because as long as I'm compliant, then I'm happy, right? Like if it was 12% and I'm running hot, well, like I'm just going to dial back my potency by inducing more plant material into it. Maybe I'm down to 8%. Well, I'm not going to lose any volume. I mean, my volume is going to increase, my potency is going to decrease, but at the end of the day, I'm going to have a compliant product versus a non-compliant product. So yeah, it's understanding. Sure. It's understanding like those relationships within the hemp industry and farming in general, which a lot of people just, if you're inexperienced and haven't done it before, you don't know. And that's why we're all here, is to kind of learn from other people's experiences and mistakes and not mistakes and their successes. So yeah, no, all very good comments. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it really does just like, it gives you just a little bit of wiggle room there, just a little bit of cushion. And one other thing that I may have just forgot, actually. So I'm going to let this guy go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you clarify the comment that if we're doing it right, all our products should be total THC compliant?
Yeah. So realistically, if you're purchasing seed from a reputable seed supplier and not like a broker, but like a name brand seed company that's been out there for several years, and you're testing in week 5, there's no reason that you should ever be above 0.3 total THC. I mean, that's just you shouldn't.
For pre-harvest?
For pre-harvest testing.
Okay.
Yeah. That's compliance testing. So week
Copy.
5 compliance testing, you should never be above 0.3. Because after that, if I'm doing biomass and I'm selling within the state, it doesn't matter what my CBD, it doesn't matter what my THC levels are.
Okay. What advice do you have to people who are interested in shipping? I have a shipping horror story.
Yeah. Okay.
And part of it is today learning that it doesn't appear to be legal to ship out of state.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you're not supposed to if it's obviously above 0.3 total THC. So I've heard, and again, everybody does what they need to do. I've heard of people selling flour. They will sell 20 pounds of flour and they'll mix it with 20 pounds of biomass, and they'll ship that product, because now I sent 40 pounds of what is probably a very compliant product. I only want to sell them 20 pounds of flour. I'm willing to give up 20 pounds of biomass so I can sell that product, because now it's watered down.
What else you got?
So, okay. Should we do a new session called "Skirting the Rules"? That's probably that's actually one of the better ones that I've got. So yeah. You can sell anything into the state of Oregon, it doesn't matter what it is. So if you've got someone that's willing to sell it for you out of state, if you've got like an out-of-state contact, say, great, do you have anybody in the state of Oregon that I can sell this product to that will then sell it to you? Because then they're taking the risk and not you. You may not be able to get as good a price as you want, but at least you're able to now comfortably sell your product.
That's helpful. I'm Nathan with Riverhawk Farm, Roseburg, Oregon. Got to throw my plug in there. Let's see. I lost my train of thought all of a sudden. Horror stories and getting it out. I wanted to. So I've shipped to Guam, I've shipped to North Carolina, and I've shipped to Georgia. And in Georgia, I was a 10-pound batch that was flagged because it smelled. And when the inspector, the USPS law enforcement guy, opened it, they said there was no COA in the box, which there was plenty of. And then it was held for a week, and this was right when USDA was releasing their rules and all the total THC confusions happening I was pretty sure DEA was building a case against me and didn't sleep for a while. He had supposedly signed it off, but it was stolen by a USPS employee on its way back to the distribution center and just went missing. So, and then, what the advice that I got from that and what I've learned, we've also shipped to Guam, which actually flies on a U.S. military airplane to get to Guam. And that was interesting, that realization when I printed the printing slip and it said, it was a military component to this. But it's, if anyone's shipping compliant flour out of state only, don't store your boxes where your product is because the cardboard will absorb the smell. Absolutely. And to wipe down everything with alcohol or the disinfectant wipes. Of course, double bag everything. Anyway, so that maybe you all know that. I'm brand new. Do you have any comments on minor cannabinoids or how they may sell or CBN, that kind of? I hear talk of CBN.
Yeah, there's a really strong market for CBN. It's tiny, and it's mostly owned right now by the labs. There aren't any CBN specific strains. There aren't any CBC specific strains. There aren't really any CBV specific strains. They're really boutique products that are coming as they're stripping when it goes through gas chromatography, they're going to basically be able to isolate all the cannabinoids separately and individually, and so that's how they're capturing the CBN. I'm hearing prices right now of like $15,000 to $18,000 a liter for this stuff. But again, it's all kind of unicorn products anyways. Like if anyone's consuming it, it's probably in a 1 liter to 2 liter volume every 1 to 2 months. And that would probably be a significant amount of consumption. It's just not a product that is, readily available. It'd be like, you're looking to buy uranium on the open market. Like chances are you're probably not gonna be able to find any,
So if you're shipping flour and your flour tests over 0.3,
yes.
Can you package your flour in the same box with biomass, but in 2 different packages and ship them out?
I always just kind of, so what, I've done it. So I've packaged it where like I will package the flour in a bag and then put that bag in with the biomass and do it that way. So, I've never gotten, and again, who's to say whether they actually open up my package or not? I mean, I've never had a package taken. I've never had that happen. I wouldn't know if they did anyways, right? I mean, I doubt it. So, but just to cover my base, that's how we've done it.
Yeah, I was gonna mention too, just like treat it like you would other things. Like get the 5 ml zip bags, clean it up, double box it, whatever you need to do, and just make everything look really official. Another thing that helps is getting like a UPS subscription, like you said, USPS.
Yeah, pre-printed packing slips.
PPP. So like another thing that helped me was you print your own labels and then you can just drop it off. And it's just like it helps you too, and maybe your nerves going to the post office and stuff. Even being fully compliant, we still have the worry. Also, I'm not sure where the insurance lies on the packaging yet, but that's something that we can talk to with USPS when you set up those accounts. So I would definitely suggest everybody do that. And insurance, the insurability of that product may be in effect. It may not, may be gray. I'm not sure yet. But also wanted to see if you knew anything about selling your biomass to processors, getting a full panel like yield test, doing your own sample run, so you actually have the yields already mapped out, even though you have to do a really good core sample rather than like a really specifically nice core sample, because that's only going to screw you both in the end and the sale's never going to happen. Right.
Ideally, you want your COAs to be a representation of what's actually in the bag. And so that's why when I tell people take core samples, you'll get, an actual like a hay core sampler or something and punch a hole in the bag, take it from the middle, take it from the top, take it from the bottom, and do that amongst several different bags and then blend them all together. And you're trying to make an accurate representation, absolutely, of your product. The lab should always be willing to let you go and see how it's extracting. They should produce, efficacy reports for you, showing you this many pounds produce this many pounds produce this many pounds produce this. One of the labs I work with does a really good job of that. I mean, they tell me down to this batch produced 10.2%, recovered 10.2%. So, they should always offer that to you.
And the importance of that, correct me if I'm wrong, would be, I mean, the yield is the ultimate tool, right? The yield is the ultimate, that's what you're trying to get regardless of whether it started at 6% CBD or started at 10%
Yeah,
CBD.
doesn't
'cause
matter
It
what the
doesn't mean
COA
you're going to
says.
get more in the end. Exactly. Like your product is going to yield what it yields based on strain and how it's treated and all of the above.
Yeah, and
so
this-
that's a definite thing I've been running into a lot lately, especially over the last year of just a lot of going through like misinformation and just kind of obligatory, just a huge amount of just nonsense. So now that there's more, like people have gone through, processors have like learned the ins and outs, the yield really has been a huge selling tool for me.
Yeah.
For labs to, or like processors, like anyone with biomass, like run your own thing, and then you have kind of the next step that they were already going to do themselves.
Yeah, you
And
should
you kind
take
of
it,
do it for them.
go, take 50 pounds and go have a lab run it independently and spend the money and see what it recovers and see how much crude you have. And in that way, if someone says, well, they got a significantly different amount than what you had previously ran, well, that's weird because I ran it to this lab and, it produced, 65% crude at, 4 kilos. And you're saying I only got 2 kilos at 50%. Well, that seems way off.
Yeah.
So maybe, then at least you have
It's a
two,
good
two
tool.
data points to compare instead of just relying solely on the labs.
Word. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. It's good questions. Anybody else? No? Awesome. Thank you guys all for your time. Appreciate it. Be here tomorrow.